Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take. I'm joined today by a musical virtuoso who has worked as a performer, DJ, musical engineer, and producer. My guest grew up in England and from an early age had a passion for music. He left England to live in South Africa, where he started earning a living from DJing. This led him to join the South African band Ballyhoo as the band's sound engineer and work with the musician Johnny Clegg. Our guest would eventually move to Los Angeles to work for the label Rhythm Safari Records. He would go on to produce, co-write and mix for a wide range of artists, including Foreigner, Carole King, Harry Belafonte, the Steve Miller Band, and Christopher Cross. He would also go on to form his own company, Summerfield Music, in the early 1990s. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Bobby Summerfield. We talk music, life experiences, cultural differences, and what music means to him. Thank you for joining us on Your Take. I was going to say this Sunday evening, but I should say this Monday morning.
Monday morning, exactly. Thank you, James. That's brilliant of you. Of course, Bobby couldn't come, so I'm going to stand in for him because, you know.
the wonders of technology. You're in Sydney, Australia. I think it's 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm in UK, and we just turned the midnight hour.
Yep.
I kind of wanted
I called you an hour earlier, didn't I? By mistake. I didn't know because the time's away anyway, whatever. I put my watch, my little Apple Watch, 9 a.m., but obviously it was an hour pre-warning, I guess. That's what it did. I went, oh, crikey, let's get on the... So at least it gets you to bed earlier, I guess. But mind you, having a Red Bull, so I don't think you're going to be sleeping.
That's true. Yeah, too much caffeine. Good to see you. Incredible.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Incredible life, incredible music history, which we'll cover during the course of the interview. But I always like to start simply with a narrative, go back right to the very beginning. You were born in England. I just want to find out where you were born and just about your recollections of childhood and your relationship with your parents, and if you had any brothers or sisters.
Good questions. Yes, so I was born in Margate at the back of Dreamland at home. Basically, my mum and dad were great. That I had a really good relationship with my mum and dad. Although after my mum died and my dad died, I'd found out that in fact my dad wasn't my biological father. He was a fantastic dad, but I had my mum had an affair, I guess, with another guy, and here I was. So I was sort of partly integrated into a family that wasn't 100% mine, which is pretty cool. But I had a great upbringing, and that's sort of what I learned from my early, about my early childhood. And also doing that, I did a DNA test on 23andMe, and I found that I have a half brother that I didn't know about, and since found a couple other, not half brothers, but I've got a half brother who lives in Florida, who's 10 years older than me. So interesting stuff as a interesting answer for the first question, I guess. But that, that's basically it. So I had a good childhood, pretty decent childhood, tumultuous in some respects because I've got. I guess that's going to be the next question because I know what the questions are. But I was kind of in between two countries a lot of my life as a kid, so it was fun, but I guess a bit of an upheaval for a younger person. But it worked for me, so it's good.
We're going to talk about your time and experiences in South Africa in just a moment.
Sure.
But obviously, music was kind of instilled in you at such a young age. I kind of want to find out kind of when you first discovered music and what were kind of the records that turned you on at a young age, and where were you kind of hearing this music? Where were you discovering it for the first time?
Yes. Well, I have a half sister who was 17 years older than me. So, and she lived at home, obviously. So when I must have been about 3, I guess she was about 20. So she was going through like the crazy years of her youth. And she was playing all sorts of music. I remember her, she loved all R&B and soul. And I heard like James Brown and all just fantastic, but pop orientated stuff. It wasn't underground stuff because it was pretty much radio listening got people's ears in those days. Obviously there wasn't the internet and there wasn't other underground avenues to hear different kinds of music. So most of the music I got exposed to was either on the radio, which was either played to me via my mum, dad, or sister. And they 3 of them had different loves. My dad was jazzy, and then like sort of big bandy jazzy lover, and also a bit of like Frank Sinatra sort of crooner sort of stuff. My mum was a bit like that. She used to like the sappy sort of stuff. Fun but sappy, but pop orientated stuff. And then my sister loved the sort of James Brown, Motown sound. Obviously that was starting big. And then of course they all loved the Beatles, so I just had that smashed at me. So I was just really confused. Not confused, I loved it. And then I also, living in South Africa, there's different styles of music around you that not necessarily heard other parts of the world. So I got exposed to, some South African artists and some African music as well, not knowing that it was being instilled in me, but it was, it's kind of interesting. So very lucky. I was very lucky to, but although none of my family were musicians, my granddad was a violin player, and my other part of my family is a drummer, and the other ones are singers, but not my direct family. They weren't musicians, but they loved it. And it was just music all the time in the house, which is great.
What kind of stations were you listening to? Were you listening to stations like Radio Luxembourg? And were you going out and buying the records, buying the singles as well?
Sure. As I got older, I did. But at a very young age, when I was in England, like Radio Luxembourg, at the pirate station. When I was in South Africa, it was called LM, Lorenzo Marx Radio, which was broadcast from. So in South Africa at that time, because of boycotts and because of under the apartheid regime, the rest of the world was boycotting South Africa. So it made lots of restrictions on music getting down there and being heard down there hard. So lots of times there were splinter radio stations or pirate stations, so they called them, sort of, that would go off into neighboring countries which weren't far away, but were allowed to broadcast into South Africa. So I used to listen to LM radio, which was, and it's back on the air, actually, not on the air, but it's on the internet now. It's lovely. But they used to play all the cool stuff, all the stuff that the Brits and the Europeans were listening to, and Americans, of course. So with a crappy old AM as well, by the way, amplitude modulation. So it wasn't even FM. So it used to phase in and out. And I used to have a little speaker under my pillow and listen to it. And like a single mono old crappy headbutt thing, and listen to it. And just every night I was listening to music going to sleep and just loving it and being excited about it. And then eventually getting a cassette machine, an old analog cassette machine, and desperately listening to the radio and trying to preempt when they're going to play the next song that I really wanted, and then pressing record and recording it so I could have it to listen to. But the DJs always ruined it because they'd talk over the first part of it. So you never really heard the first part of the song until the singer started singing. They'd stop yakking and then you'd hear the music. So kind of a naive, simple way of getting a music education, not really being educated, but just appreciation and enjoying it. So it was lovely. So it made it hard for me to find good music. Well, not hard, but hard for me to find good music, but it was well worth it. And then, as you asked the question, yes, as I got older, I think I was 8, and I had what I wanted for my birthday was a double album of, I think it was, Sounds Hits. I think it was like a compilation album of all the hits of the time. But I was disappointed because I got home and it was done by a local South African artist, a studio band, who actually became my friends, but they did a really good job, but they re-recorded all the songs because of licensing laws in South Africa at the time. It was too expensive to license the actual original recordings, and that still goes on in South Africa and in some parts of the world. So instead of paying the license to the record label for the actual proper recordings and releasing those records, they used to get the cover bands. They'd buy the record, and they would get studio musicians to take down the music and replay them as close and production-wise as possible. And that's what I got pissed off. And that's when I realized, okay, I must can hear the difference between a fake version and a real version, because I thought, that's not the real version though. They're very similar, but why did, and I was like, and I was really pissed off. So that's one of my very vivid recollections of buying music. I was like, shit, don't look, make sure you look for the real players on it. So that was quite funny.
You mentioned about a whole range of influences from the Fab Four to soul and Motown and so on, and
Yeah.
about the radio being a key part of your early life. But I want to come on to audio electronics, because you became a hobbyist and you decided to start building your own mobile DJ systems and
Yep.
going on to work as a full-time professional DJ.
Yeah.
When did this kind of happen, and how did this sort of fascination come about?
Yeah. Just by the way, just to add to your thing, in South Africa, when I lived between England and South Africa, but when I was in South Africa, there was no television before 73, I think. So the only way to get music was radio, just out of interest. So it's very limited. Anyway,
Sure.
no pop shop or no Top of the Pops or pop shop, Old Grey Whistle Test, nothing like that. Although I had experienced it beforehand in England when I lived there. But anyway, I was a bit of a nerd kid as well. I was a bit sort of, my real name's Leslie, but everybody called me Bobby because I was hyperactive and sort of like pulling things apart. I remember my mum's Hoover broke down. My dad was an engineer, mechanical engineer, and he always encouraged me and taught me how things worked, kind of being a MacGyver. And my mum's vacuum cleaner broke down and my dad was at work. And she's like, whatever. And obviously it was electric. So I pulled it apart and worked out what was going on. I thought, okay, and I'll fix it and put it back together again, and it worked. So I was like, ding, she was so happy. I thought, oh, great, acknowledgement, here I go. So that kind of was a bit of a spark. And then I just proceeded to pull everything apart I possibly could that was electric, the toaster, everything. I mean, seriously, and break things terribly. So along with that came a bit of an insight, and just like a street, I guess, awareness of electrical bits, but not really knowing anything until I started to buy magazines. One was called Everyday Electronics, and one was called Elector, and whatever. And I started to learn and understand how to read schematics, and then started to read books on, I was about 12, 13. And then I had a couple of mates that were hobbyists in that same area, much smarter than me, and I learned from them. And we just shared, like kids make rockets or bombs or shit like that. We just ended up making, like electric shockers and doorbell inhibitors and windscreen wiper interval variables and all that sort of shit. We just made silly things like that. So it was kind of that's how I got into it. And then I started to get better at it and make hobby kits and stuff. It was kind of fun.
We've established that you were born in England. You were born in Margate. How long did you live in England for, and what made you decide to move to South Africa? How did that come about?
I had nothing to do with it, actually. The first time I went to South Africa, my mum and dad immigrated. My dad was an engineer, and he was obviously had a good skill set that was useful in South Africa. So they gave him permanent residence to go and live there. Excuse me. And the first time they went over there, I was about 2 years old. So, but being somewhat restless souls, I will say, it was hard to assimilate, I guess, for them at that stage, because I was 2, I didn't really know, into South African culture. So they would go there and they would spend about 9 months there and decide, oh, no, bugger this, let's go back to England because I think it was better there. I feel like a cup of tea. So they'd go back there. So that happened literally 7 times. They would go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So, and that happened all the way up until I was about 15, 14, and no, sorry, that's rubbish, 13. So 13 was the last time 12 and a half was the last time I lived in England. I went to school in England. Then I went to South Africa and stayed until I left as a grown-up sort of thing. So that was why they pop back and forth all the time. And there's an Afrikaans saying called soapbeel, which stands for salt dick. And that was because they used to say that about the immigrants, is they had one foot in their own country and one in Africa or in South Africa, and their cock used to hang in the ocean. They used this side information.
When you sort of permanently emigrated to South Africa, what kind of year are we talking around?
So that was what was that? That was, so permanently immigrated would be 70. All right, let me just think. So 1375. Yeah, 75.
And when you're in South Africa, the whole kind of music thing just kicks off for you. You kind of all of a sudden build a career in music, but I wanted to talk about kind of your early discoveries. You were in a band called Ballyhoo as the band DJ and sound engineer, and then you go on to work with an acclaimed South African musician called Johnny Clegg. Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you about your involvement with them and a little bit about what South African music and the musical scene was like at that time.
Yeah, couple of questions there. I'll answer them as efficiently as possible. Starting first of all, I worked as a kid to earn extra money at a company called Electronic Research Laboratories, and they would sell components and do fixings of things. And I was there to be trained as a fixer. But as part of it, as a kid, I used to sell components to people come in. Two band members came in that were in Ballyhoo because his Mellotron had broken. And he came in looking for the parts. I said, "Oh, is this for a Mellotron?" He said, "Yeah, how do you know about a Mellotron?" I said, "Well, because, I said I can fix it." So I went and fixed it. And that's how I got the job with Ballyhoo, or that's how I got introduced to Ballyhoo. And I said, "Hey, I'm actually a DJ, really. If you ever need a DJ, like a little cocky kid," and they were the biggest band in the land at the time, for pop band anyway. And they said, "Yeah, okay, no worries." But ironically, 5 or 6 weeks later, they say, "Hey, our DJ is not going to be able to make this gig. Can you come and do it for us?" And I said, "Sure." So I did, and that's how I got that gig in Ballyhoo. So I was actually a DJ playing with them, and I used to tour with them. They would do the live band, and then I'd do the DJ set, and then we used to intermingle, and I used to sometimes sing a song with them, but that was about it. So I wasn't in the band, but I was part of the technical, silly part of the band. I've got pictures of me in the band, but I wasn't really a musician in the band. But anyway, that's my little thing. And then while doing that, I was doing other work, DJing. And I met other musicians and worked with a lot of other bands. And one of them was one of my jobs was to do a promotion as a DJ on Saturday morning for an artist, two new artists called Johnny Clegg and Sibon Kuna, which is the members of Jaluka, which then became Johnny Clegg and Zavuka. Anyway, so they were a multiracial band, and that was illegal, right? So apartheid in South Africa, from about 1945, 46 said black people can't be with white people, and you've got to be segregated and keep them separated and keep them down, essentially, to paraphrasing, but that's basically what it was from a white regime. And so these two guys, black and white guys, dancing and singing together was terribly taboo. And I think maybe the guy I got handed the job by somebody because maybe they didn't want to do it. And I said, "No, I don't care, I'll go and do it. I had no care about being, what color does make any difference to me." Because had been in England and it was a non-racial, or at least less racial, dare I say, mindset than South Africa was. I was like, "No, I don't care. People are people." So that's how I got into meeting Johnny Clegg, and then and the same sort of thing, being a cocky kid. I said to the producer, who's still my friend who lives in Sydney now, I said, "Oh, by the way, I know the musicians on this album who played on your thing. I know this bass player." And he said, "Oh, how do you know that?" I said, "Oh, because I'm a DJ, but I'm learning engineering. I'm an electronics engineer, and I want to be in the studio." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Well," and I said, "And I mixed Ballyhoo live." And he's like, "Oh, okay, it's pretty good. If you ever need a mixer, let me know. I'll let you know." And that's how I got that gig. And so I just bullshitted my way through life, essentially, from rope to rope.
You've mentioned about sort of the political system that was in place in South Africa.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to discuss that with you. I
Sure.
wanted to ask where you were living in South Africa, and also about the apartheid system. Did you kind of witness, when you were performing and sort of on the road, did you witness segregated audiences, and what was kind of your take and experience of all that?
Yeah, well, to answer the question, I went to school and lived in Johannesburg for a big part of it, and then finally in Cape Town. So I even moved within that country as well. So when I was with Jaluka, that was the original, that was Johnny Clegg and Sipo's band. They called it Jaluka, which means sweat. They were, Johnny's vision and Sipo's vision together was to show that music can bring people together, no matter what color you are. And for that, of course, we used to play in lots of what they called townships in South Africa, which were the segregated cities that were kind of kept out, like the fafalas or whatever. They're just like put out away from the white views, basically the periphery of the big white city or the big cities, where they would, lots of them are migrant workers that would come from other countries just to make money, and they would live there and come into town and work, cleaning houses, then go back to their place at night. So lots of the concerts or lots of the shows we would do would be in those sorts of places, townships they were called. And going into the townships, sometimes, people, for the majority of Africans or black people that saw us, they loved us because they knew what we were doing was good. However, there were lots of black people that just were like, we don't dig white people, maybe because they've been so hurt by them, no doubt. You just can't, it's hard to, I can understand their think process. But sometimes also at concerts, people would drink, and whether they're black or white or purple, sometimes booze doesn't affect them well, and they just get violent. So there was lots of aggression, lots of times. I saw lots of, I saw one guy get killed at one of the concerts. So lots of shootings, lots of ran for my life many times, literally, as was the whole band. And being one of the white guys, because I was the mixer of the band. So I'd stand I was the front of house mixer, it's called, and I'd stand in the middle of the concert hall, adjust the sound and balance the band. And obviously, if anybody was pissed off, the only person they turned to was, the white guy's right here, so let's give him chuck some shit at him. So they did. But that was, I'll say that's 5% of my experience, but that was scary. But 95% of it was beautiful. They're beautiful people for the most part, and they're very welcoming and warm and educating for a white kid that had been sort of in a cocoon. You grow up as a white kid in South Africa, you don't really, you see black people and you think, well, they're cool, you don't know anything about it, but slowly but surely you see racism pop up with your friends or other people saying things, derogatory stuff. And then you go, I'm not quite sure what that means. And you just don't really, as a kid, you don't know what racism is. You go, well, they're just people. And then I think at some stage in your life, you get enough of a brain cell going, you go, well, I can't see anything wrong with these people. What's wrong with them? And then you either go that way or you go that way. Or maybe some people go that way and change their mind. Maybe some people go that way and change their mind. But anyway, so that's how it worked for me, I guess, being exposed to, apartheid regime in a multiracial band. Having said that as well, lots and lots of white people hated the band. Well, the staunch, nasty white people, I would say, that didn't want apartheid to be abolished and didn't like integration and were happy to keep the status quo and keep blacks away and have our white bubble. So, death threats were on answering machines and, just nasty stuff. And including, Neil Agate was one of Johnny's mates. He got murdered by it's just like dangerous. So I guess, I don't know anything about it, but I can imagine going to like some very racist, white, predominant city in, say, America. I don't know if that's the case now, but either way, going there and dancing around with the black guy, people are not gonna like you. So that was part of the thing I experienced as well. So I just saw the nasty side of both black and white people, I guess. And it was an good education. Scary sometimes, but mostly beautiful.
My next question is, obviously, if you move the clock forward from the 70s on about 15 years, you get the release of Nelson Mandela, elections in South Africa, Mandela as a political leader and a kind of an icon in the West view. Yep. Have you gone back to South Africa since the kind of end of apartheid? And
yes.
Have you seen kind of major changes since the Mandela era, in your view?
Yes, I have. I've been back to South Africa lots of times. I was there only 2 years ago. DJ'd at my ex-wife's birthday party. Anyway, and played with Ballyhoo. Yes, it's okay. So one thing, even under apartheid, there were lots of white people that didn't believe in that regime. There were lots of them. Most of my friends, certainly musicians and the creative crew and the lefties, were much more loving and they wanted the right thing to be done. So that they weren't all nasty people. There's lots of beautiful white people there that just really wanted that to be done, and that's who I kept in with. So there was also a warmth there and a wanting to integrate. But after Mandela got released and after the apartheid got abolished, there was there was just much more of a coming together of support from the world. I think more so the world, the international world started to help or want to get more involved by investing more, and so that part of it was positive. But there's been a lot of negative stuff that's gone on, and I'm talking from, I'm not educated here because I'm not living there anymore, but from the way the government has been, seems to where the government has been run up until today, or when Mandela passed away, it seems to have been going downhill rapidly with corruption and stuff like that. So I guess there's a positive because the rule of apartheid is gone, certainly, but I don't think the quality of life for lots of people, black and white, on mass has got better. I think, unfortunately, there is, like any economic structure, a lot of black people are more happy now because they can make much more money and have big houses and live next door to white people. But there's also still a lot of suffering there for white people and black people, still mostly black people. And also because they're a very porous border system, and South Africa being a little bright light in the dark continent, let's just say, lots of Northern African people migrate south for work just to survive, but then it causes animosity. So it is better because apartheid's gone, and of course it's on the right track, but it's going through a tumultuous time right now because of lots of cross currents of economic, social mess, basically. But it's still a beautiful country and a lot of beautiful people there wanting it to work. But yes, it's Africa. What can I say? In as much as that's a positive, not a negative about Africa, but it's a work in progress. It's grinding. It's just working new ways of doing things in the world, and just that's what Africa does. I think it's the mother of the world. So
From your experiences in South Africa and your interesting points of view on your time there and the politics and cultural differences, I wanted to kind of move away and talk about how you got involved in record producing. And I also we mentioned the TV thing at the beginning. You mentioned shows like the Old Grey Whistle Test and Top of the Pops, but you presented a TV show on national TV when you were out in South Africa called Fast Forward. I wanted to ask you about that as well.
Yeah, so I got into record production because I was just playing DJ. I was playing in clubs, and I played most obviously dance clubs. So I play all the pop music, but I do different sets of different clubs, different styles of music with different places. Some nights I just have to play high energy dance music, which is sort of like fast house, 130 BPM, Blue Monday, that sort of stuff, all night long, thumping, beat mixing, just doing that sort of thing. Some clubs I used to play more R&B and funk and soul. Then sometimes some clubs used to be like a pop hybrid, where I'd be more like a radio DJ, where I used to yak over the top of it and introduce the songs and say happy birthday to Sarah and here's James coming up, sort of crap. So it's kind of a bit like a Butlins holiday DJ at some stages. But and so I'd play all sorts of styles of music and enjoy it. But so by doing that, I'd listen to so much music, contemporary pop music of the time. I gravitated to the shit that sounded good, stuff that just jumped out the speakers. I was like, wow, how do they produce that? And I'd go home and listen to it and put my headphones on, and because I was an electronic nerd, invert the phase of the speakers and hear what the engineer's doing with the delays and the echoes and the effects. And I was just obsessed at reading Mix magazine and Recording Engineer and Producer, it was called REP at those days, and seeing what the new technology is and what the Americans are doing and what the English are doing and all that sort of stuff. So that's how I kind of got into engineering. I also offered and did work at a studio called RPM. That's right. And I offered to work there for free to make, basically just to learn to mix and studio. And that's how I made good friends, and they're still all my mates, but made good friends with the engineers there that taught me. Richard Mitchell was a mate of mine. He taught me, that's a knob, turn it. Oh, okay, good, got it. and that's how I got into engineering. So basically, and also I'd been mixing, the lucky thing is I'd been mixing live sound for a long time with Ballyhoo. I was 16 and a half. Yeah, I was 16 and a half when I started mixing live sound for Ballyhoo, or not mixing, but 17, I was fully on doing mixing, and then Jaluka and doing tours. And Jaluka traveled all over the world. So I was an international. We used to, open for like Men at Work and big concerts, and so I had to have my shit together. I had to know what I was doing. By then I did, believe it or not. I've forgotten it now, but either way. But either way, I had a good understanding of live mixing, which is balancing on the fly and getting stuff sounding good quick and making stuff stand out of the stereo mix. So that was a good arsenal to have that a lot of beginning studio engineers didn't have. So it was good. And I had a good understanding of pop music sound. I didn't know how to get it, but I knew what sounded good on the vinyl or at old vinyl at those days. So that was my good grounding into being a record producer. And then just loving music, being a kid and just having a memory of all those good records that were just like smoking vocal performances from James Brown or the Beatles or Pink Floyd or Dave Bowie or Peter Gabriel, just like, wow, all these great records. And in the 70s and 80s, it was a very fertile time for creativity from record production. I think most probably the best, because I think technology peaked then. And so it made had such a chance to do unique stuff for production. That's what enticed me. And that's how I got into it, basically.
How did the sort of television gig come about? And just tell us a little bit about the program. What kind of program was it?
It was called Pop Shop, and then it became Fast Forward while I was there. Pop Shop was their Thursday night National One TV show, which was like the old Grey Whistle Test. It was like, I'd be like one of the DJs. Okay, here we have tonight. This is whatever. Or I'd interview bands or the artists or whatever. And so I would interview, like they'd have a band come on or an artist, and I'd say, whatever. And there was a guy called Ian Warren and myself. Ian Warren was the original presenter, but they wanted a younger, crazier dude to start to do it. So I should send you a picture of me anyway, you'll see why. But either way, he was an older guy, he's a lovely guy, but he was a little older, and they wanted a younger demographic. So they chose me, and because I was a DJ, I guess they kind of said, oh, he's good enough. So, but how I got the job was Ian interviewed me in the studio about record production, and because we had a bit of a hit, started with Johnny Clegg, and he was interviewing me, how the drum boxes work. And I've still got the video somewhere where I'm explaining the Linn drum, and I programmed some stuff, and I played a bit of keyboards. I said, this is how it all works, and this is how you make a song. And so he got a lot of positive response on television. And they said, who's this guy? Who's this guy? And then the producer of the show said, hey, do you want to come and present one of the shows with us for fun? And I said, sure. And then I just did. And then I guess on a rating system, they said, oh, he's good. So they kept me in, and I started presenting the show, which was absolutely silly, but it was fun. But it was great because I used to get really good tables at restaurants when I went out. Amazing what television would do in those days.
I want to talk about another phase in your career now. First of all, you're hired as a staff writer and producer at Minc Records. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're transferred to Los Angeles for a newly formed record label called Rhythm Safari Records. When did the kind of move occur? And I just wanted to ask you how you felt about having to move away from South Africa to Pastors New. Did you have any sort of reservations, or were you determined that it was time to do something different and kind of move to America?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. I'll give you a bit of pre-information. I don't want to make it too long, but the reason why I got transferred to South Africa, from South Africa to Los Angeles, Hilton Rosenthal, who's the producer for Jaluka at the stage, and I was his engineer, and that's the guy I played the records for, and we met, and he lives in Sydney now. We became mates, and we became a little team. We produced records together. That's what we did. However, Johnny Clegg's record did quite well and got heard by Paul Simon. And Paul Simon contacted Hilton and said, hey, who are you guys that did this record? Can I come down and use your musicians? So Paul Simon came to South Africa and used the musicians that we used, and Hilton organized in another studio and recorded Graceland album. I don't know if you know, heard of it, and it was a big hit.
Yes, and one of my favorite albums, stunning album. Yeah,
and that was recorded at Sapbell Studios in South Africa, Johannesburg, by Peter Thwaites and his engineer, I think. Anyway, Peter was my mate. He recorded it, and I went in there a couple of times when they were recording it and everything. But anyway, so having said that, Paul Simon said, you guys, or you, Hilton, should go to LA and set up a label and start working on records from my artists, and I'll feed artists to you. So Hilton said to me, hey, this has come along. Paul Simon suggested we go to America. Any thoughts? No, he didn't really ask me, but I said, fuck yeah, let's go. So I loved South Africa, but I was frustrated there musically, and primarily technically as well. The problem with apartheid was that the international world shunned them and stopped good music coming down. No artists would come down. It was very hard to get international artists coming down, except if they went to Sun City, but you could only see them and that was it. And my love at the time was like the London sound. I loved what coming out of England. I loved Trevor Horn productions, Frankie. I know I was I was a DJ, so I enjoy that sort of stuff. But Frankie, Sounding Apple, Art and Noise, all these sorts of really great bands, Depeche Mode, Thomas Dolby. I mean, all this shit was coming out, and I loved synthesizers, and I started studying additive, subtractive, and FM synthesis, and getting into. I've still got a bunch of real synths still, so I loved it. So I was frustrated in South Africa. I wanted to make songs that sounded like Nick Kershaw or Go West or all those great sounding records of the day. So for me to be able to get out and go to America was great. So I had no regret in leaving South Africa for that point of view. However, I did regret giving up, my 15 minutes of fame, because I was a presenter on television show, I guess, and all my lovely friends there, and I love them dearly still, and I loved Africa, and but I thought, well, I got to go and do this now. So I did, and that's what happened. So I did. I went to LA and helped Hilton. I built the studio for Hilton, and we started producing records there.
Obviously a golden opportunity going to the States and living in Los Angeles, and then incredibly further to the story you painted and all your musical connections and so on. You work as a producer, songwriter, mixer for so many artists. And I just naming a few here. You work with Foreigner, Carole King, Christopher Cross, Harry Belafonte, brilliant Steve Miller Band. What was it like working with these artists? And can you share any memories and stories?
Sure.
Working with some of those names.
Yeah. I think, well, they're all beautiful art, and they all got their own unique thing. Harry Belafonte was the first album that I recorded and mixed, and that was Paul Simon's artist. He suggested Harry Belafonte meet Hilton, and Hilton produce his record, and I engineer it, and that's what we did. And that was my first job. My first job was go to LA. Here's Harry Belafonte. Here's Capitol Studios. Here's the record button. Carry on. So it was like, oh, okay, this is good. Although it wasn't, because it was hard finding my feet in Los Angeles, but it was very good. Let me just think. I mean, Carole King, I mixed her live album, and I opened up some piano for her, fixed a couple of vocals for a record and mixed it for my dear mate who died, unfortunately, Rudy Guest. He was a producer, but either way, she was amazing artist. I was a big fan of hers. Always, of course, as a songwriter, you cannot not love her writing, at least if it's your style. And I used to have good chats with her. I used to ask her questions, and she used to say, "These are some funny questions for an engineer to ask me." I was asking her songwriting questions, and I became her friend. What she used to call me, she used to call me a groovy nerd or funky nerd. That's what she says. You're a funky nerd. It's kind of fun. And my ex-wife used to work for her as well, for a record company. But A Foreigner was a fantastic band. I'm just thinking of things. Foreigner, I mean, here's one thing, Foreigner. I was mixing this 3 singles for them. I was mixing this thing. I was at the record plant mixing this song. I think they were in Hong Kong on tour. It's beautiful rock and roll story. And they're like, "Can you play me the mix?" I said, "Sure." So I had a cell phone. I played it, had up the speaker, said, "Yeah, it sounds pretty good." And they had some good advice. Listening on a crappy old phone over like in Hong Kong, and said, "Yeah, it sounds great. I like the middle bit. Can we do another ad lib at the back there? Add another one of the singing." That's Lou, was the lead singer, Lou Graham. He said, "Can you add another ad lib?" And I said, "There's nothing on tape." He said, "All right, we're going to arrive tonight. I'll come and sing it tomorrow morning." I said, "But you're in Hong Kong." He said, "No, we get back tonight at 11:30 to LA. I'll come in tomorrow morning." I'm thinking, fuck, he's not going to be able to come and sing an ad lib at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so anyway, I worked late, and I was in at the studio at 9:30 in the slim chance that Lou Graham would come in and sing ad libs. And why I say that is normally in songs, as you know, an ad lib is you just sing, well, whatever you're going to do. It's normally the higher in your range, or it's normally a step out, and it's normally sung at the end of a song. When a singer's sung the whole song, it's pretty warmed up and their throat's nearly blown, and they sing a couple of good licks. You've heard them on all the big records, or all good singers. They sometimes they'll sing the melody all the way through the song, kind of sticking to the melody, but then at the end, they'll do some step out notes, and they're normally the hardest bits to sing. So I thought, oh, he's not going to sing this, or if he's not even going to arrive. But yep, he does. He came in, Lou Gramm and Mick came in, still smelling the booze. Mick, oh, bless him. But anyway, he came in, Lou came in. I said, hey, man, it's the first time I physically met him. He said, hey, man, how you doing? I was like, oh, fuck, we've got a laryngitis. Hey, no, I'm all right. I seriously sounded like, lyrics. I was thinking, shit. So I said, well, I've set up an 87, a 67 a microphone in that room there. You want to give this a shot? He said, yeah, play the track. And I was like, okay, I'll play the track. And it's like, and he said, okay. And he went into the room, seriously. I put the mic on, obviously, and he's going, okay, hit it. Seriously, and he sang about five different lines. Oh, my hair stands up now. Such a talent, such a talent. It's like sick. And he walked out, yeah, man, okay, great. I'll see you later. I'm going back to bed. And that was his vibe. It was just, it wasn't quite, I'm going back to bed, but it was amazing that somebody could sing that well that early in the morning after being on a plane. Just fucking, that's like athletic singing. And he's a beautiful voice. And he's just, so that was one of my many beautiful singers I've recorded. Howard Hewitt was another beautiful, great singer. He was a singer in the band Shalimar. I don't know if you know Shalimar.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Amazing singer. I was like, there was another, so I loved R&B, and I wanted to get into R&B and hip hop because I love funk. I love many styles, but my favorite style, I guess, to listen to and enjoy for the groove of it is funk and R&B. And I wanted to do more of that, but I found it very hard in LA to really get into that scene. For many reasons.
You mentioned R&B. I wanted to pick up on Steve Miller, because Steve Miller kind of had this kind of resurgence in the sort of mid to late 1980s. He had The Joker, got to #1 again, the re-release in the UK, and it was part of a Levi advert. He did that song Abracadabra. What was it like working with somebody with kind of a very good blues pedigree in the 70s and working on some of those really good albums? What was it like teaming up with him?
Absolutely amazing. I was mixing Paul Abdul record, because Paul Abdul had anyway, and I got a call and he says, hey, Steve wants to do some recording and he wants a bit more of a modern thing. Do you want to come up and meet him? He's in where was he? In Idaho. And so I said, yeah, I'd love to. So I went up and met him, and we got on really well. And he had a lovely studio, big SSL and a big like barn. It was a bit like, he still got it. It was, I guess, very similar to like Pete Gabriel's studios, like a big ass, expansive barn where the band plays live. And anyway, it's beautiful. So I went up there and he said, yeah, I want to do a new record and my stuff's not sounding good anymore. What's going on? So I said, well, the first thing we've got to do is we've got to get you back to your old stuff. He had digital tape machines and stuff like that. I said, he said, well, he had a lot of dosh partly because he was a really good songwriter, and he had a really good clause in his contract, which he told me about to give me good advice, which could be good advice for a lot of people. He had a reversion clause in his contract. After 20 years, the publishing rights came back to him. And at the time of signing it, I guess Capitol, who he was signed to, thought he's going to be dead in 20 years. Who cares? Yeah, give it back to him in 20 years' time. However, it just so happened he had a resurgence, as you said. His songs became bigger and bigger with the young people in America, like 25 years after they were first released. Because I guess a lot of the modern music coming out was crap, at least in that genre, were not as nice. And so he started making, decent amounts of dosh, I guess. Anyway, so he gave me a lovely budget to go and buy all sorts of stuff, which I did. And I bought a 16-track 2-inch tape machine up and piles of Paul Tex and parts of analog stuff. And we started cutting stuff with his band, who were fantastic musicians, really great original band. And one of the jobs I got to do with him was he got a license request for a re-record of Fly Like an Eagle. It was his big hit. And it was for it was a national ad campaign for the US Postal Service. That's like the post office. So my job was to emulate that record from a production recordings as best I could with the band. So the band, literally, it was the original band that played the original recording, playing on the same instruments. They had these, he said, that's the guitar I played, just different strings. And we got pretty close. So that was kind of fun. And it was lovely. The band was smoking, monster musicians on all levels. I mean, they were just good. And they taught me American football. Throwing the ball, that silly game, I used to call them. Yeah, they were good. So yeah, lots of good experiences with them. Really lovely.
Working with Foreigner, Carole King and Steve Miller Band, we're going to move on to the early 90s and forming the Summerfield Music Company in LA, your own company. Can you just tell us a bit about the company and what made you decide to set up the business? And also, I wanted to talk about some of the sound libraries you've created for other artists to use.
Oh, sure. The Summerfield music thing was secondary. So went to LA with Hilton for Rhythm Safari. And then unfortunately, somewhere around 89, I think the US stock market crashed and venture capitalists pulled out of everywhere. So he lost the funding for going forward, for doing more with his label and his studio. And I think it was after about 4 or 5 years, the dosh eventually started to run out for him because he didn't have any money-making hits, although we had some, at that stage, good hits, but they weren't money-making. The record industry was in a nosedive, record sales were selling off. So he said, look, I'm going to close shop. I'm going to go and live in Australia. So just letting you know, whatever. So I said, okay, I think I'm going to stay. Let me buy a bit of the gear from you. So I bought some of the studio equipment, quite a bit of it, and figured I'll just stay on and do my own thing. In the interim, I fell back to doing electronics, and I started a small company called Home Studio Services because everybody was doing home studios. So big studios were closing down left, right. So I'd go out and help people set up their home studios acoustically or electronically, or make them patch bays. And I had a couple of people working for me, which did quite well and was a great bridge business for me to keep myself afloat from becoming, a record company person to a freelance mixer. And I got a call from I got a call from JBL to fix their mixing desk for a big artist. And I went out, and it was Oliver Lieber's studio, who's Lieber and Stoller's son, not Lieber and Stoller, but Jerry Lieber. So, and I got on really well with him. He had a mixer, a Soundcraft, and I fixed it for him. He said, oh, great. And I said, well, actually, same story. My card, I said, I'm actually a mixer. If ever you need an engineer, let me know. So he said, oh, okay. And at that time, Alan Meyerson, who is his engineer, got called away to do Aretha Franklin, I think so. Anyway, and Alan was a man of mine. He said, look, do you want to step in? Ollie said, do you want to step in? So I stepped in to finish off recording an overdub session with Paula Abdul, and she did. And we did her vocals, and I got on really well with her. And then I ended up doing the record, and I ended up mixing it in the end of one of them or two of them. And so that's how that started. So it was all electronics, always got me a gig, and me being a brash little fucker, saying, here's my card, I'm a mixer. And lots of people didn't take me seriously because they're going, well, why would you be fixing mixers if you're a mixer? I'm like, no, I'm just going through a stage right now. I'm just ascertaining what I want to do. So that's how I started to get into Summerfield music. And then Summerfield music, I started writing with a buddy of mine doing jingles. We got, luckily enough, I contributed to a jingle that got picked up by General Motors. And then the agency called us back, and we got another gig, and then we won that contract. It's called, and so you start, and in those days you made a lot of money on jingles. So that was a great leg up for me to start getting into jingles and writing short bits of music, like literally 30 seconds or a minute or 20 seconds. Some of it was quite silly, but quite complicated because it would require a full band, or, it might be 30 seconds, but you've got fucking full on brass section, a real band playing. And you really had to have your technical and musical chops together. Even though the music was not musically complicated, it had to be done in a short amount of time. And I think you'll find, if you look at session musicians and jingle music composers and conductors or anything, they may not be the most creative people in the world with purple hair and Ray-Bans and pierced noses. However, they can really do their shit. And you put them in the middle of it, and they'll get the job done. So it was a great training for me. I learned a lot, got my ass kicked a lot, but learned a lot. And that's how I started to build on Summerfield music, getting lots of different legs up. And then I started writing music for a music library that was being formed by a company called Capital Cities, which eventually got bought out by Disney. And it was for ABC, American Broadcasting Corporation. I ended up and still do write for them. And that's for about 22 years. I wrote maybe 3,700 tracks for them. And it's still in their music library and still gets played all around the world. I hear it on Australian television. I hear all the stuff. I go, oh, that's mine. I used to do that. So it's fun. So that's the nice part about it. And that's how I started Summerfield Music, building it up. And then the sample libraries, or the music libraries, I think you're asking about. I did do a sample library. It was a co-collaboration with a friend of mine, Andrew Crestis, which was a drum library that was musicians used to write songs with. Actually, it was orchestral, but either way, it was for people doing like trailer music. They would buy this program, and the sounds I'd recorded drummers playing, and they would press a button and the drums would play, so they could write their music over the top of it. So I did that, but I did a music library, done 2 music libraries. And one is called Trailer Trash, and it's music for trailers. That it's music written in a vacuum, I will say, about 2.5 minutes long. It's normally can be different styles of music, but generally quintessential, large building, bombastic sort of stuff. Tonight, in a time when there was this and that, those sorts of things. Manic stuff. That's called Trailer Trash. I have that, and that's distributed by a company called Anthem, or Five Alarm, and they distribute it worldwide to people all around the world using it. And I'm doing a new one now. I started a year ago called Aardvark Music, which is about 50 CDs, which is for television underscores, documentaries, which is, if you watch a crime drama movie or a documentary or even a movie, but sometimes they'll have a crime drama and they're like, in 1957, nobody knew that there was 19 bodies stuffed under this caravan. There was music, creepy music, until investigators, whatever, you paint the pictures or whatever. So many styles of moods of music for underscore. That's what I'm doing pretty much now.
You touch on cinema, and I wanted to kind of move on to cinema because I hear another string to your bow as being film composition and television composition. Can you tell us about some projects you've worked on and how that kind of process differs to, say, mixing a studio album?
That's a good question. One of the lucky things I got involved with was, because of Johnny Clegg and Savuka, I got involved with The Power of One, which is a movie called The Power of One, and the composer was Hans Zimmer. And I got to meet Hans and sort of, I ended up helping him technically as well, building patch bays for him and helping him with his studio stuff as well, but learning a lot from the way he worked in his workflow, but also introduced him to African music. Well, not me personally, but I think our group certainly did. And he met a mate of mine called Lebo M, who eventually became the voice of The Lion King and collaborated and still is going around the world promoting. And he wrote that whole series with Hans, and that was part of my connection into like African through music studio into film, which is kind of fun. So I touched my toes into that. So to answer your question, mixing from a pure balancing point of view, for movies, generally, they've always been multi-format. So stereo is the stereo version for records. Generally these days, not generally, but for the most part, line share, mixes are done on 2 speakers. So it takes a certain skill set to make things sound good, because you have to, fool your ears to make things sound like they're coming from a certain direction, or they sound distant, or they sound present, or they sound exciting, whatever. That's one skill set that takes a while. When it comes to movies, they normally mix in a multi-format mode. These days, a lot of it's Atmos, which is immersive music, which is another thing I'm doing. But in those days, or still now, it's called 5.1, which is essentially 5 speakers on 1 low frequency. So you have more creativity, because you can make things come out of different speakers, and you can make, the dialogue comes out the center channel, but sometimes the guy's talking and there's a river flowing, and and the stream is trickling in your ear over here. It's kind of fun, and the birds fly over there, and they fly over here. So you have all these aspects going on, which is the final mix. But for music, you generally supply stems, they're called. I'm getting technical. I don't want to get too technical, but you essentially supply to the movie mixer, or you get as the movie mixer, stereo mixes of different instrument sets of the piece of music that you're going to use. So let's just say it's a pop song in a movie, or let's just say it's a pop song going to be used in the movie. They will ask for the drums, the bass, the keyboards, the guitars, the vocals, the background vocals, and any other instruments. And they'll have the ability to change the volumes of those in the balance in the event when that pop song is playing. The singer of that pop song, let's just say it's a vocal in it, interrupts your understanding of the dialogue being spoken by the actor on screen. So if the actor's saying, and then we're going to go over, and they're speaking softly, you can't have the vocal of the song that loud. They have to pull it down. So that's how it kind of, you have to have the ability to rebake the cake, so to speak, as a film mixer. And I hope that I answered your question correctly, or or if I went off too much of a technical tangent. I don't want to go too technical, but
no, you did. Yeah, it's really interesting. You mentioned earlier on, you said you felt you entered the music industry at kind of a key time where interesting things were going on, and they were kind of pushing the envelope, developing the medium, and lots of people were kind of buying records at the time. And you mentioned innovative producers such as Trevor Horn in the UK and so on. Nowadays, obviously, the music industry has changed so much with, streaming. I suppose less and less people buying physical records and downloading with stuff like iTunes. You've got Spotify. Do you think it's become almost impossible for like new artists to make a decent living from music in these kind of modern times?
Well, I mean, I just worked on a record with a friend of mine here. He's a nice, well-known producer, good mate of mine, for a local artist called Jimmy Barnes, who's a big he's a solo artist. Now he's with a band called Cold Chisel. And I worked on it with him. It was #1 here in Australia 2-3 weeks, well, maybe a month ago. I'm not telling you for any other bloat other than it sold 6,000 copies. So that's a really good sell amount. But as you well know, 6,000 downloads is not going to let you to retire. So the music industry is from a making money at it point of view has changed completely. I won't say it's collapsed, but it's completely changed. It's certainly changed from back in the 70s and 80s, where the only way to buy music was either on vinyl, and then eventually on CDs or cassettes. So there was a great revenue. There was a great amount of money made on the actual buying of the music to purchase, so you could listen to it. People listen to it now, as you say, of course, they get streamed it for free, and the artist gets a minuscule amount of royalty, performance royalty for that stream. So it's pretty hard to make a living on streams only. So artists have to be able to go out and perform live, where they can, unfortunately, they have to ask for exorbitant amounts of money for their live concert fees, tickets, only because they're not making any other living any other way. And so they have to, there's a whole merchandising world around artists, much more than there was before, because that you have to put more weight on making money that way. A point being, if you're a songwriter these days, or for an artist, or a producer for an artist, in the old days, you would say, okay, I'm a songwriter, so great, I'm going to get songwriters royalties. And, you do get royalties when the artist gets played on the radio, or if they sell, you get you get a bit of the money. So you can make a half decent living at it as just as the writer, or as the producer, you get 3 or 4% on the record, and you do get royalties as the record sells. Very good. These days, the records are not selling much. So even if you get 4% or 5% as a songwriter, you're not really going to get royalties to survive. So lots of times people ask for what's called a 360 deal. I'm only telling you this because it partly is talking to why why the industry has changed so much. But for like people like myself, behind the scenes sort of people now, they ask for 360-degree deals on a song or an album that you're recording. So let's just say I'm recording an album with an artist, and his or her artist is called Big Table. And so Big Table, I produced it with you. I've written 5 songs on there with you. I want to get my royalty share if and when it gets played, and my production share if and when it gets played and sold. However, if you make a cap with big table on it, or if you go on tour, then I want 0.25% on that cap. Or if a t-shirt says artist X, big table, then if I produce that record, I need 0.25% on that, because that's the only way I'm going to make some money.
I see. Okay.
So you get 360 degrees, you get every aspect of that entity. So that's primarily what's going on now, or at least people are trying to make a living at it now. So to answer your question, can artists make money at doing music these days? Yes. Compared to fantastic living of the old days, no. Generally not. I'm personally good friends with lots of big artists, and they are doing well, but their record sales are not as great. I mean, really big artists, and they're not. I'm not giving you names because I don't want to, but either way, they make money, but it's not like it was. So they have to rely on their concerts. They have to rely on playing to 90,000 people to make a good chunk of change to pay for, their lifestyle and surviving, enabling to keep on going. So for a new artist to come out, it's bloody hard. I think there's something like 40,000 records get released each week. And 40,000, I mean, there's not enough time in the week to listen to them all, even if all the A&R people in the world, if there's such a thing anymore, but artist and repertoire person, to find and see what's, it's just so much coming out, partially because of technology, iPhones and computers. It's so easy to do tracks these days that, anybody can, with a little bit of knowledge and a computer, can regurgitate a track and chuck out a 3-minute wonder in 6 hours. I mean, less, but either way, let's just say, including vocals and everything, and it will have as much airtime as an artist that spent 2.5 years writing it. So that's the problem. It's not a problem. It doesn't mean to say that all the artists that spend 6 hours doing a track on a laptop is crap, but it does mean that there's so much more shit coming out. It's just impossible to absorb. It's just like rain. It's just like, well, what's, and there are so many brilliant artists out there. There still are really great, talented people, but it does get clouded by less talented people or people that are just putting shit out. I mean, and that's just what it is. It's that the barrier to entry or the barrier to getting your music out there is just gone, which is good on some aspects, but the negative is there's just so much music now that it's hard to hear it. So to answer your question, can an artist make a living at doing music? Yes, they can. It takes a lot of luck, a lot of determination, obviously having good music does help, but they have to have something that works. Instagrams and all the social media things, people taking pictures of doing silly things to try and get eyeballs, to get acknowledgement, is one of the ways, but there's not any one radio station anymore that gets people educated. And tonight his number, they would always play like a new song, like the old days, Casey Kasem or any of the big DJs in England, Radio 1, Capital. They used to play da 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 da. Here's the thing, and here's tonight. This is number one, but here's another new album coming out from this new artist we just discovered, and everybody would hear it because there was a more focused transmission, let's just say, as opposed to like 40,000 songs a day getting released. It's just impossible to hear. And where do you go for listening to music? Where do I go? I mean, I listen to it all over, but there's lots of places you can go, but you have to have somebody curate it for you and hand it to you, because you just don't have the time of the day to go and search. That's the trouble.
I was going to ask you one final question before we come on to the quick fire questions at the end, which I always enjoy. Kind of a similar question. We mentioned television earlier on being kind of pivotal to the music industry, and you presented a show as well. We had all these kind of influential shows like Top of the Pops, the Old Grey Whistle Test, the Tube in the 80s. We kind of, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but we're kind of suffering now from a lack of music being shown on kind of mainstream terrestrial Sky channels. Why do you think that is? And do you think there will be a resurgence? The kind of only thing we've got here is really kind of the late night show with Jules Holland, which has been on for decades now. Yeah.
Definitely. It's a shame. I mean, I love Jules Holland show. It is a shame. It's unfortunately, it's the music business. It's 10% music, 90% business. When there's no money in it, people don't do it. So that's it. You know, MTV, was the peak of the music business. I think, at least music video business, obviously. And that's what is MTV. I know it's still running, but do they play music anymore? It's a shame, right?
Not sure.
It really is. But having said that, I think there will be, I hope, let's just say, but like all things do come around. I love roller skating on quads roller skates, and they've come around again. So everything can come around. I think maybe somebody will, with some balls, I say, maybe in 5 years' time, say, something, why don't we just have a music show? It's going to be like new artists and a new thing. And that might help. I mean, that might help if you've got a good listenership. It's money, though. It always has been, unfortunately. Where there's money, it costs money to broadcast terrestrial. Terrestrial television is expensive to run, licenses and transmission gear and people. So they need to make some money out of it. And if the artist doesn't make money and the record company doesn't make money and nobody's making the music to make money, man, I'll just go off and make reality TV shows.
And they've been doing that for a long time now.
Yeah, definitely.
Going to move on to the final quick questions. We always wrap up with every guest with these questions. So the kind of quick fire questions, kind of just to see what you like, what you don't like.
Sure.
So number one, the first one, what is your favorite pastime?
Oh shit, I should have said playing football.
And second one, what's your favorite film and why?
I should have read these. American Beauty, old one, American Beauty, because it's dark and real.
Oscar winner as well, Sam Mendes. Yeah. Who's your favorite novelist?
I don't read. I really don't read novels.
Okay.
Sad to say.
If you could have had a different profession, what would it have been?
I most would have stuck to DJing more and kept in television, or at least done acting.
Who has been your greatest inspiration in life?
Inspiration in life, that's deeper than just music, right? Inspiration in life, my dad.
Nice answer. Do you read a newspaper, and if so, which one?
Electronic one, IBD, International Investors Business Daily. Boring, but.
What's your favorite food?
Tokyo style sushi, generally in Los Angeles. Actually, only in Los Angeles.
And now, who is your favorite cultural icon?
A person?
Yeah, a person.
Cultural, John Lennon. It's not really a cultural icon, is he? But I guess I could say that.
That's a nice answer. I like that one. I'm a huge Beatles fan, so that gets my thumbs up. You can say this, you're allowed to, and we've had some interesting answers. What is your favorite curse word and why?
Only one?
Yeah, only one.
Fuck it. For fuck's sake, that's it. And why? Because it's concise and to the point, one syllable. It's like, bang, fuck, done.
You've been to many places in the world, but what's your favorite place or holiday destination?
Ooh. Cape Town, South Africa.
Tricky one for you because you've got so many musical influences, but who is your favorite music artist and what is your favorite album?
It's like saying I don't have kids. It's like saying which kid would you prefer? You've got to get rid of two. David Bowie, Hunky Dory.
Okay. What's your greatest achievement to date?
I guess, surviving. Hey, I'll tell you what, greatest achievement today, never having a day job.
Lovely answer. And the final one, how do you wish to be remembered?
He was a silly fucker, wasn't he?
thank you for joining us on Your Take. I got to say this morning. It's been so interesting to hear about all the things you've done in your live career, places you've been, the South Africa story, the Los Angeles story. It's an incredible journey working with so many people. You've done so much for music. Thanks for joining us and sharing your life experience. It's been...
Thank you, James. I really appreciate it. Really feel honoured to be on it. Thank you very much. Lovely chatting to you too, mate. Thank you very much.
And finally, how do we find out more about yourself and any kind of current or future projects you're working on?
Oh, good question. I've got a dodgy website I don't think I've looked at for 10 years called summerfieldmusic.com. But anyway, if anybody wants to contact me, they can certainly bang me up there. I think it's I think it's me at summerfieldmusic.com. Anyway, what I'm working on right now, actually, I'm working on doing, it's called Aardvark Music. It's the secondary music library I'm doing. I'm on CD 52 right now, which is going to be a licensing music, not going to be, it is out there already, but I'm just adding to the music library. So I'm doing that, and that's for licensing to television and movie makers and documentary makers and whatever. And that's what I'm doing. Just keep myself busy. And my studio is in LA, but I've got a little, you can see it out the back there. I've got like a little writing room for, a little gig room there, 4 computers networked together. But the good thing is I'm overlooking that, so it doesn't suck.
A nice view to wake up to on a morning.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah, that's what I'm up to.
So thanks once again for everything, and yeah, wish you all the very best with everything in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And you too, James. Thank you very much. I love what you're doing here. It's brilliant. Nice. Good questions too, really. Thank you. Not just saying it either. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry to keep you up so late.